Hi, my name is Catriona Starpins and I love all things that sparkle, especially glass beads. Today we're going to make some little earrings with some cup chain, so let's take a look at the materials we're going to need. Alrighty, so on the bead mat here I've got everything I need to make this little pair of earrings, and the feature bead for these is going to be these lovely little Czech glass. These are a pressed Czech glass disc bead, and they do have a little hole that runs through them across here, so that will be super handy to secure them into position. I've got some of this beautiful cup chain. It's like a capri blue colour or blue zircony sort of tone. Very nice when paired next to these lovely beads. I've got a couple of seed beads. I've chosen a 11399J, which is a colour lined amethyst purple, and it's a Matsuno colour. A really lovely purple colour, purpley blue. And then I've got this one, which is 11DC4217, and that's a Miyuki Duracoat Seafoam. So I've got that one there. I've got a little piece of felt foundations, like a stiffened felt. I've got a piece of ultra suede. I've got my trusty little thimble and finger protector. I like using the straw, John James straw size 11 needles, so I've got one of those. I have some scissors. These are now on my website, available at catrionastarpins.com, and they are perfect for cutting your file line. They have a little serrated edge here. They're actually a little fishing scissor, so really cute. They've got little rainbow tips and I am loving them so far. And then we also have trusty file line. I'm using the 6 pound 125 yard smoke and a thread zap. This is the new Beadsmith rechargeable thread zap. Bit of a game changer. I love that I don't have to keep buying batteries for my thread zap, and it's been super good. I've been using it for over a month now and I just love it. There is another video on my channel which I will link down below if you want to see the review on this wonderful thread zap. A couple of things I forgot off the list that we will need too is I think it would be nice to do a little Picot with perhaps a size 15 bead. I picked out these Duracoat Silverline Nutmeg. I've got my tube of E6000 glue, and I've picked out a couple of copper earring findings as well. So the first thing we need to do is attach our shape onto the base foundation, and they are double-sided, and sometimes there is slightly different iridescent colors within the etching or the printing on these. So I believe they've been laser etched, they've been coated and then laser etched to have these beautiful patterns on them. So pick the side that you like the best and that pair well together. They do have, you know, the slightly different rainbow tones in them, but I think that still makes them really beautiful. That combination there makes a really nice pair of earrings. Also think about the orientation you want your earring to have. You can obviously change that later if you want to, but just have a think about where you want this to be. And I've chosen this way up. I'm just going to add a little bit of E6000 for a little bit of extra security on this piece. It's not necessary for this because we do have that hole that we can stitch through, but I'm just adding a small thin layer of glue on there just to make doubly sure that that's going to stay in place. So in an ideal world I'd be leaving that to dry, but not today because we are going to get started. Now you can burn a little knot with your thread burner on the end of your file line. Just melt like that, and you can see that's super hot and it's melted a beautiful knot. This is straight from a fresh charging. I did just charge my threads up. And I've got a comfortable length of thread to work with. You can always add in a thread as many times as you need to quite easily with bead embroidery, so make sure that you've got a nice comfortable length of thread. And I'm just going to find where that hole is and pull the needle up against that knot we made and stitch this down into position. And I'm going to do that 2 or 3 times just so it's a nice firm hold. That's 2. And this is 3. Now, just so that the thread doesn't get in the way while I'm showing you the next step, I am going to knot this off, but I wouldn't always knot that off. I would quite often tend to not have that cut off just yet. So I've just done 2 little half hitch notches on the back there, knots, and then I'll stitch through to a spot away from the rest of the threads and melt that off with the thread burner. It's probably a little bit tricky to see black on black, but I assure you there's a little knot melted there. Now we're going to be putting the cup chain around the edge of this bead, and I learned a neat little trick when doing a class that you can actually glue the cup chain down first so that it doesn't, it's not as tricky to hold, and I found that really a really great tip. Something I want to show you about the cup chain is a lot of people think that you need to spread it out when you're going around something, and if you spread your cup chain out you can see that the stones are pulling outwards, and from the top view you end up with your stones facing outwards. That's not what we want to have. We want to push the cup chain closely together so that the stones face upwards in our design. I'll just show you that again. If I pull that out, you can see the stones have now ended up on the side. So try not to pull the cup chain too tight when you're working out the length that you need. And I find if I just rest it down where I'm working, and if I just scooch them up onto the piece of work to work out how many I need, I would always rather cut too many stones to begin with and then trim one off than not cut enough to work with. Holding it with my little fingers, oh, what's that little bridge there? And you see between the stones here they have these little bridges between them, and that's what I'm going to cut through. And yes, I'm going to use my nice new file line scissors to do that. And I have just cut the length that I think I'll need, so now I can test it again. You can see if I've got it right stretched out, the stones face outwards, and if I just bunch them up together they sit nicely. Okay, so I think that's the perfect amount of stones to go around the outside. Now the tricky part with cup chain and gluing it is getting the glue to be where you want it to be. And I've tried lots of different techniques. I've tried putting it onto an awl and laying it down. I've tried fine tip glue bottles that get very gunky very quickly and are not so fine tip anymore very quickly. And I find the easiest is just to use the E6000 straight out of the tube, put it on the back of the cup chain and then lay the cup chain onto here, and I'll just quickly show you that. So I hold the stones so that I've got the stone facing away from me, and I'm looking at the back of this. And I just dot the E6000 gently onto the back of the cup chain. Like that, and you only need a little bit. I'm just trying to tack it in position just to hold it. I'm not trying to get it too blobby. And then you just lay the cup chain glue side down around your piece, and you do have a little bit of time once you've done this to sort of put it into position and guide it with your fingers as to where you want it to be. And then I just sort of space it apart so that my little stones are roughly the same distance apart all the way around. And the best thing you can do now is to leave that to completely dry before you start sewing and go and have a cup of tea. Okay, so I've left those little cup chain to dry, maybe about 5 to 10 minutes, and now I'm going to stitch them in place. So I've put another little knot in the end of my file line, and I'm going to bring my needle up just right next to the edge of where those little stones are, where the bridge is between, and I'm going to bring my needle up and then go down again over the top of that little bridge. So my thread is couching this into position. and I'm going to do that between each of those thread bridges right the way around. Now this position here is where the two ends come together, and I'm actually going to do a neat little trick which is kind of hard to do, but I'm just going to hook my thread around the claw of the cup chain just to pin that end down in position. So I've just sort of got my thread to go under the claw, and then I'll do the same on the other side. And that just means that where they join, I'm just sort of guiding the thread under the claw. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to get it in there. And then back down into the fabric. And that just means that the ends are not going to lift either. You don't want to pull that stitch too tight because you don't want to put too much pressure on the little claw holding the stone in, but it just helps to hold that in place. Now I'm back to going over just over little bridges. That one got stuck on a claw that I didn't want it to. Just have a little look each stitch and just make sure that it is pulling down in between those stones. And because I only put a tiny little bit of glue, it's held it into position nicely when I'm stitching it, but it's not hard to sew through. So just make sure when you're gluing it, you don't put too much glue, because you don't want to be stitching through something that's rock solid that can't be stitched through easily. I am pushing my needle with every stitch with the thimble. It's just how I find it easier. And we'll see how far I've gone. You can see my little stitches there, all black on black. It's a bit tricky to see, but I'm almost all the way. There we go. Looks beautiful. Alright, now I'm going to bring my needle up to the edge in preparation to do a row of seed beads along the edge too. I'm going to do a 4 bead back stitch around the edge here. I pick up 4 beads at a time and I lay them down up to where they've come out of. Bring the needle down, get the needle knotted, get a little knot here in my fine line. Just going to pull that out. Okay, so we've got that knot out. So now I'm going to bring my needle back up close to the cup chain and come through just the 2 last beads. And that completes our 4 bead back stitch. Let's show you that again and try and not get a knot this time. Bring my 4 beads down, lay them up next to what you're doing, pass down through the foundation, come up in the middle of those 4 beads and just go through the last two again. And we're going to go right the way around with that. And I think these purple colour beads are really helping to bring out the purpley highlights within that etched bead. You can see each time I lay them down, work out where my needle needs to go. Come back up again through just the last two, like that. And you can see when I pull those beads up, I'll show you on this one, I use my thumb to, I'm always using this thumb on my left hand to guide the beads where I want them to sit. And even when I'm pulling up the thread here now, I'm still guiding them. And I'm making sure, I put my thumb on them when I pull the tension up, and making sure that they're sitting nicely each time. And I'm getting to the point where I can probably only fit maybe 2 in that last little spot. I won't need to pick up 4, so I'll pick up 2 beads and then go back through 1, and you can sort of put them on your needle, test them in the gap, make sure they're going to fit nicely. Okay, now I have heard of people doing, always going through those beads again. If your beads are quite wobbly at this stage, you don't want to pull them too hard against your cup chain and distort the piece, but if you might find that by going through all those beads again is just enough to hold them into position for you. So I mean, it's a completely optional step, and by that I mean some people like to just thread through all of those beads again, and it just creates a little bit more tension to hold the beads up snug. But don't pull this row too tight, because you can really distort your work doing that, and I've seen people create more trouble, especially if you're bezeling a cabochon. I've seen people create more trouble for themselves by doing that extra row. But if you think it makes a difference for you, by then all means go through those beads again. Alright, so we're only doing a little bit of bead embroidery on this piece. It's just going to be an earring, and I think that's quite enough beads. So we're going to knot our thread on the back here, just bringing it through over to the middle so that my knot is not near the edge. And I'm doing a few little half hitches, and then I'm going to melt the end off. Little knot. Melt the end off like this, and there we go, we've done the stitching. Alright, so I've just switched back to my old scissors that I've been using before these, just because I'm cutting the felt now and I don't want to blunten my new fire line scissors on the felt. And I'm just going to trim around the design up close to the beadwork, but I don't want to cut under the beadwork and risk snipping my stitches. I want to make sure that I'm just capturing the beadwork. You can go back and trim little bits later if you think there's a bit still showing in one spot, or if it's not quite rounded how you like, you can go back and just adjust that as needed. But I think that's looking pretty good. And if I was using a lighter foundation, I would come in and colour these edges black to give a nice shadow, but being a black foundation for this one, we don't need to. I was making a earring for like a little stud earring. This would be the time that you would put your stud finding in the back of this and glue it into position. But I'm going to be making a earring hook style with little fish hooks. Here they are. My earring's going to be like this. Now I've chosen a copper finding, and that's why I've brought in a coppery bead for when we do the little picot edging around here, because I want this coppery bead to glisten all around the edges and tie in nicely with that nice copper finding. Okay, so the beads I'm going to be using for the edge is the Seafoam Duracoat beads, DC4217 Duracoat Seafoam. If I was doing something larger than this, I may want to put a piece of template plastic in between the ultra suede and the backing, and what that does is just helps to really smooth out your stitches so that you don't see any lumpy bumpy work on the back. This is quite a small piece. It doesn't have a lot of stitches pulling it on the back, so I think it will be fine. And your ultra suede, one side's fluffy and one side's not. So the fluffy side is the nice side, and the flatter side is the side that you glue your beadwork to. So I'm just using a very small thin layer of the E6000, and you can see I'm using the tip of the glue end itself to spread that. And you'll notice that I didn't put my glue right to the edge because I want to stitch through that later, and I didn't want that to be in the way. Now we just want that to glue into place. You can leave this for a few minutes to dry. On this occasion, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just trim around it. So when you're trimming, you want your foundation and your ultra suede to end up the same size. So you don't want to cut your beadwork underneath the foundation. You want to cut right next to it so that it ends up the same size. So keep your scissors at a 45-degree angle right up next to that foundation and just gently trim around it. If I was cutting something really intricate, or a fancy shape that was a bit harder than a circle to cut, then I would cut closer to the work first and then come back and trim carefully around that shape. On this occasion, a circle's pretty easy to cut out. You can come back and see if there's any spots where you think you might need to trim it a bit more, and I think that's looking pretty good. So now we're going to do our edging, and we do this with our thread. I'm going to bring I've got a knot on the end of my thread. You can see my little knot there, and I'm going to bring that up between the cup chain and the beads on the front of the work and bring my needle up towards the back. Now it's gone right down in there and you can't see where it is. And we're going to do a picot edge around this. So I'm going to be picking up for the first stitch 3 beads, but every stitch after that until we get back to the end we're going to be picking up 2. So for this first stitch I'm going to pick up the one that I've got for on the edge, my picot size 15, and the one that I've got on the edge on the other side of the picot. Now bring them close up to your work like this, and then thread back through that last bead added in the opposite direction. Now this bead here is going to sit a little bit funny until we get all the way around. Don't worry too much about that. So for the next stitch I pick up my 15, which is my picot, and my size 11 seed bead, and I make the next stitch. You can measure it with the bead on your needle. Place it up next to the work like that, measure where the stitch needs to go, and then make your stitch. You can add picots after you've done your edging. This just saves us coming back and adding them later. We're adding them from the start, and you can see that adds that nice coppery glint on the tips of those beads, and that's what's going to make this tie in with our coppery finding really nicely. So stitching from the front to the back, and then back through that second bead. So you only have to go through that little size 15 bead just the once. Pick up the 15, pick up the 11, measure your distance of your stitch, come through, and then back through just the 11. And you can see those beads are sitting really nicely on the edge there. And we just continue that the same until we get right the way around. The trickiest part of making a little earring like this is we're going to need to choose, once we get around it, which way is up. And I find that if you've got a wobbly part of your beadwork, or you've got something you don't like how it sits to the rest of it, if you centralize that, it just means if anyone's eye is drawn into that section, then it's a bit more balanced. So I always like to have a look at the earring before I decide where I'm putting the hook on, and just make sure that it's looking balanced. If you're enjoying making these earrings, please press the like button and comment what you like about them below. While I'm beading around this, I'll just tell you a little bit about an event that's coming up. It's the Melbourne Bead Expo. So here in Melbourne, Australia, for the last, gosh, I don't know, I've been a member of the Bead Society for, I think it's on 17 years this year. And they have a Melbourne Bead Expo with exhibitions and traders and workshops. And I'm really excited that it's coming up again. The month has changed this time. Previous years it has been held in November. They've moved it a little bit earlier this year due to changing of the venue, and I'm excited to see this new venue. It's going to be lovely. It's at the Murrumbeena Community Hub in Murrumbeena, not too far from the station there, I believe. And it's going to have workshops and traders. It's going to have an exhibition of members' work and non-members' work, because they have a bead challenge every year. So people, anyone from within the beading community anywhere around the world can enter the bead challenge. And everyone gets the same set of beads, and it's fascinating to see the way that everyone interprets how those beads are going to be used, and I find that really exciting to see. And the general public get to vote in the bead challenge. They've also got, on the Saturday this year, is going to be a room where you can come along and bead with your friends. So you can come and do some beading, then go back and do some shopping. Then, oh, I forgot this, I might need this for my beading. Go back and do a bit more shopping. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's the first time I'm going to be there as a trader. So I'm going to have a table with my kits for sale. I'll have samples there. I've also got a few cabochons that I've been making, and lots of new items that I've been painstakingly photographing and getting onto my website. So keep checking in at catriona.starpins.com, because there's new things being added all the time. And if you're interested in coming to the Melbourne Bead Expo, do have a look at the Bead Society of Victoria's website. I'll tag them down below, put the link for their website for you to check out what they've got happening. Some wonderful workshops you might like to book into, and make a real weekend of it. So the dates for 2025 Melbourne Bead Expo are the 11th and 12th of October. It's a Saturday and a Sunday, and it's running from 9 AM till 4:30, I believe. 4? Maybe it's 9 till 4. I'll confirm that in the description of this video below. Check in with that. And it should be a really fun weekend. If you're one of my YouTube viewers and you're going to come to the Melbourne Bead Expo, please do come and introduce yourself and let me know that you're a subscriber, and love to say hi to you. Now we're getting towards the end here, and I've got the space for one more bead. I'm going to do that one more stitch, and then we're going to add a picot between the two beads that are already there and pull that naughty bead into line. So for this stitch, I'm just picking up the picot. I'm going to go through that existing bead that's already there, like this. Pull that in. Then I'm going to go through the foundation like I have been in all the other stitches, and then back up through the bead. And that just pulls that last one into line with all the rest. You can see that's looking really nice from this side. How we're looking from the front. Oh, it's gorgeous. I love it. Really pretty. So now I need to work out where do I want the hook to hang from? Maybe have the hook, see how there's this bolder piece here? I think that sort of needs to be centralized at the top. So I think I want my hook to be roughly here-ish, would be nice. So I'm going to bring my thread across, and it's just come unthreaded. Hot tip for threading your needle, just bring your thread right down in your fingers like this so you can barely see it, and put the eye of your needle over the top of it like that. If you love this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Okay, now I'm just going to thread, I'm coming through that Picot bead. I'm going to go down this one here. Now, where did we say we wanted the hook? Roughly here, I think. So that, oh, helps if we have the hook facing the right way. I think here, so that this bolder section of the swirl is in the middle and towards the top. So it sort of draws your eye in. So I could either go up and down all these beads, but I'm actually just going to dig into the foundation and suede and do one big stitch and come right across the top there. And it's quite a tight stitch there, so I'm just grabbing my trusty pliers to pull that through. And that's just because I didn't want to go and do zigzags all the way. Alright, so I think it would be nice if I had a little loop of beads here that go through this little finding, and it's got like a little loop here to attach to, and then a nice little decorative bit there. So I'm just making sure that's closed here so that the earring can't slip out. And then I just work out how many beads. I think maybe a loop of 3. Let's try 3 and see what it looks like. Pass the finding through and come down this one on the other side. You can see I've just added 3 beads. I've come out of this side. I've got my 3 beads and I've come back the other. So I'm just pulling that up to see what that looks like. Oh, I think it's quite nice. It hangs quite nicely. Do the hang test on the little screen there for you to see. I think that's going to be good. We want it to have a little, see how it's got a little bit of play there. When I pull that up tight, it's not holding the earring too rigid. So I think what we'll do is just go back through those beads again a few times, just to get that thread path to be nice and strong. So there's more than just the one loop of thread there. See how that's looking now. What I might do is put another little seed bead in the gap there, down the bottom, between those two. Doesn't fill it too much, it's still hanging nicely. Yes, I think that's still hanging beautifully. And then I think we'll just go through another time just because we can. If the beads are getting a bit tight and you can't thread through them too easily, then it's probably time to stop. I can get through those once more okay to make that nice little loop at the top there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just weave back down into some of the beadwork here to be able to tie a knot. So I've just come across into the next picot stitches, and I'll do a little half hitch around one of the thread paths there, come back through that picot, go down. I'm going to bring it up over near the cup chain. Going to do a little knot in the beads And the edge over here. And then we'll melt that off so that it's not in the way. All right, there we go. We have one earring, and I think the copper really frames it beautifully. Just those little tiny amount of seed beads around the edge there frames it really nicely, and it also brings in the color of the finding into the piece so that it all marries together nicely. So we need a second earring now. Better make a second one. For more inspiring tutorials, please follow me on catriona.starpins.com. Sign up to my email newsletters. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for joining me in the studio today. Happy beading. Bye.